Amen.
I know. Here we go, yo.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Matt Caddo, Senior Fellow in Public Policy with the American Kratom Association. I thank you for this opportunity to speak to this committee today. The American Kratom Association is a consumer-based organization. We advocate for more than 24 million people across America who use kratom responsibly and safely. Also for the hundreds of thousands here in Georgia that do as well. As you just heard from Jerry Keene, Jack Kingston say, 7-OH is the problem here. The focus of the federal government enforcement actions today, after extensive scientific reviews, is that natural kratom leaf is not the focus, it is 7-OH. And that's important, an important distinction that needs to be made. An advocate was writing an email on a Gmail program, and I've got a screenshot I'll be glad to share with you, talking about 7-OH when the Google program advised her that she should replace 7-OH with kratom. That is the problem that we're facing here, because it is too easy for people to think that they are taking natural kratom leaf products when they're actually taking 7-hydroxymetrogenine, which is a chemically manipulated and deliberately engineered opioid, masquerading as kratom, introduced into the marketplace as a kratom product. They misled millions of consumers into believing that they were purchasing a natural kratom leaf product. It is simply not true. And when you look at the federal websites, and I agree that they can be confusing, because when you talk about a drug, then obviously there is no approved drug therapy in the United States for the use of natural kratom leaf, or 7-OH for that matter, and therefore it is not an approved drug. We understand that, appreciate it. An important distinction is that under the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, dietary supplements and botanicals are in a separate category. They do not require clinical trials to prove safety, but there is a requirement that every manufacturer has a duty prior to market entry to demonstrate the safety of their products under the conditions of use, meaning labeling. And that is where kratom is regulated today. You heard that from Bob Durkin in your last hearing, a former deputy director of the Office of Dietary Supplements. For those that suggest that kratom is unregulated, it is not true. It is regulated. Now, can kratom products be regulated better? Yes. The American Kratom Association recognized in 2019, when we started promoting our Kratom Consumer Protection Acts, one of the first states in the country was Georgia. We recognized two important safety considerations. One is the product should not contain more than 2% of the overall fraction of the alkaloids in the product being 7-OH. That was before the 7-OH people actually concocted their dangerous opioids. We knew it was a concern. Secondly, we knew that highly concentrated extract products using industrial grade solvents posed a threat to the American public. When you hear about death events, they're not caused by natural kratom leaf products. They're caused by these manufacturers who deliberately try to spike the potency of their products, and they create dangers to the public. It is critically important that policymakers understand and comprehend in their legislation those kinds of problems. FDA, the National Institutes on Drug Abuse, and HHS today report on their websites that kratom deaths are rare. When they do occur, they are because of adulterated kratom products or polydrug use, and sometimes underlying health conditions. I know that there's a concern about how you buy these products. I went out this morning, local store, a gas station, and I bought Monster. Okay, I purchased it. I could walk in and buy it. Now, no one's going to mistake me for being under 21, so they didn't card me. I don't think this is a cardable product in the state of Georgia. And yet today, in USA Today, and you can look at it, you have the doctors want energy drink deal paused with the Big 12 and the NCAA. Why? Because it poses an emerging threat because of the high caffeine content of that product to children. And they don't want the NCAA advocating for it through their promotional deals with the Monster Energy drink products. I then went to a convenience store and I purchased Imodium. This is for anti-diarrheal. If you look at the data from CDC, you will find that Imodium had 12,987 reported adverse events through the CDC and the poison control centers. Kids buy this to get high. This is what it'll do to it. There are deaths associated with Imodium. I purchased this in a convenience store right down the street. Then I went to CDC. This is a 21 and under product. It is Benadryl, right? It was, and I don't mean disrespect. I see she left Miss Cave. Her grief is real. We should treat every death. Every parent who feels the grief, we should respect and honor those. But she brought it up. Her son on the autopsy report had a high concentration of Benadryl. Benadryl is a sedative, but when we abuse it, it creates real problems for people. And if you look at the data on Benadryl, you will find that there were 9,645 deaths reported from that product that I bought at CDC. I did not need pharmacists to intervene. No, it was not behind the pharmacist's counter. It was available to me right on the counter. So perspective is extremely important when we look at these problems. And how do we appropriately recognize this? You do not have a witness from CDC invited to come to these hearings that could tell you about these kinds of problems. You do not have a witness from the NCAA to account for why they're doing promotional deals with monster drinks. You don't have a witness from the addiction recovery programs talking about these products, the abuse of these products by the constituents that they treat and the addiction problem that come from it. No witnesses were invited for that purpose, and yet again, for youth exposure. And Mr. Chairman, you need to consider that because it hasn't happened yet. With respect to joint consumers, in the last hearing, there were more than 24 who were there, signed up. They wanted to speak. They were pro-kratom. They didn't because the agenda was so stacked that they didn't have time. Understood that. They weren't invited to this hearing. The names were recorded. They registered, and the chairman chose not to invite them to come and speak. Yet he invited people that he identified as anti-kratom to speak, gave speaking slots. I respect that. Every voice should be heard. But we didn't get to hear from the pro-kratom people. And in my opinion, Mr. Chairman, respect, it's an abuse of your authority as chair to not at least balance the presentation, because each of these members of this committee and the legislature that will read the report from it deserves to have both sides. No invitation was made. Now, it's a long drive, but we accommodate Zoom meetings, right? People can Zoom in. We saw that last time when the chairman invited other people to testify. There is no ability for remote testimony in this hearing, unfortunately. Chairman Townsend told me in the hallway that the thing about the AKA is that you are industry funded. We do accept, this was over at the Capitol, we do accept funding from industry representatives who are willing to accept regulation. The vast majority of the kratom manufacturers in America and none of the 7OH people are willing to accept the regulation that we propose. That's a problem. And yet we're industry funded. And yet each one of the groups that you're going to hear from today, for example, End Kratom Addiction, is funded by the addiction recovery centers. They just got a $50,000 grant that they highlighted on their LinkedIn page. Other groups are funded by the addiction recovery centers. So why is that important? Because the addiction recovery centers know that kratom poses a threat to their profit streams. And if you look at the announcement that was made on June 1st of 2026, this year, by the National Institutes on Health, they are going to study an investigational new drug application for purified metrogeny, the principal alkaloid in the kratom, for opioid use disorder. Now, two things are important about that. It validates the fact that people have reported that kratom is helping them get off of opioids. It's not the problem. They're helping them. Purified metrogeny, not 7OH, right? Responsibly manufactured products. The second thing is, in order to qualify for an investigational new drug application, You have to pass an institutional review board, which is constituted of experts to evaluate whether you can safely consume the product, purified metrogeny, not even the stuff you buy in naturally products, which is a much lower concentration. And that IRB determined it was safe. You would not put the subjects at unreasonable risk. And criticized what the FDA's dose finding study said. Read it. Dr. McCurdy explained it in the last hearing. This was a safety study designed to see whether or not they could then move to a human abuse potential study, which they did. And now that study is ongoing at Baylor University. This idea, Mr. Chairman, respectfully demonizing all of the kratom consumption and ignoring those people and not inviting people that should be invited here. We listened to more than 20 minutes from the chairman's friend, Mr. Breedlove, who is from an addiction recovery center group. Shatterproof is here, funded by the addiction recovery groups, and kratom addiction I've already mentioned. Mr. Templeton, who was a witness, is an expert witness and gets funded by trial lawyers. And yet industry funds us, and somehow we're not credible as you go along the way. The critical factor we all have here is exactly what the risk is of kratom use and all of that. The FDA has a FAERS database. It's called the Adverse Event Reporting System. Every death and every adverse event is reported to the FDA. They then evaluate to look for clusters of adverse events or deaths that are attributable to a substance, kratom. They look for correlations between the interactions between kratom and other drugs. And their responsibility is, and they do it, by the way, they issue black box warnings when they demonstrate a safety profile for a prescription manufacturer to say, do not prescribe this particular drug if your patient is using kratom. They can require black box warnings on. They haven't done so. They've studied it, evaluated. Go to the FDA and kratom webpage and go to the FDA and 7OH webpage and look at the scientific evidence that the FDA has generated, which contradicts, Mr. Chairman, your thesis that kratom should be banned. Naturally, kratom is not the focus of the FDA, not the focus of HHS, not the focus of DEA, and yet, Mr. Chairman, respectfully, that has been your crusade over the last 3 legislative sessions to ban kratom. And we don't hear this other point of view. And this committee, where you have determined where all the witnesses are, all virtually are overwhelmed with anti-kratom advocates, and you don't listen to the other side. You did not extend an invitation, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah,
Dr.
Mr. Haddow, thank you. You can keep tirading if you want, but right now you kind of repeated yourself. So if you'd like to finish your comments, I'd be glad to ask you a couple of questions, and the committee would too. Would you like to finish any other comment?
We would.
Please go ahead.
And your characterization of my being on a tirade, I did not hear you say the state of your friend, Mr. Breedlove, when he went on a rant. You didn't say, call his a tirade. You applauded it. Frankly, Mr. Chairman, I think that's offensive, but I'll conclude.
Thank you, Mr. Haddow.
You did not invite Dr. Marilyn Eustace, who testified during the legislative hearing, who is an world-renowned forensic toxicologist who explained the issues about tox reports. You did not invite to this hearing Dr. Jack Henningfield, who a former NIDA scientist who's done kratom research across the board. You didn't invite Laura Romney of the International Plant and Herbal Alliance, who's a kratom advocate, Dr. Heidi Sikora. No invitations were extended to them. And I'll conclude with this: enforcement. Enforcement is important. Georgia's enforcement is terrible. We agree. We advocated to include in the bill, which, Mr. Chairman, respectfully, you rejected, that there should be, for each kratom product placed into commerce in Georgia, the manufacturer had to provide a certificate of analysis from an independent firm, lab, documenting that that product was compliant with Georgia law. We required and advocated for labeling that's consistent with FDA requirements for dietary supplements and botanical supplements. We wanted to add money to have a web page so every retailer would know what the approved products were and that every consumer could go on and see what they were. You rejected that, Mr. Chairman. We wanted to provide the money through a tax, an excise tax. on kratom products to fund enforcement. And Mr. Chairman, you rejected it. So I'll conclude with this
Yeah,
final
thank you.
thing.
Yeah,
Mr.
thank you,
Chairman,
Mr. Hadow.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Go.
could,
What's that?
we are filing a complaint with the speaker, which I'll give you each member a copy of, because of the unfairness of how this has come. We do this with great regret. We want there to be a fair hearing because these members of this committee and the entire legislature should see a balanced perspective. This has been unfair. It's been biased. It's been completely for those kratom consumers who wanted to speak and couldn't, you didn't invite. We think that that's unfair. So with respect, I'll circulate to all the committee members. I'll hand up the complaint, but we're planning on filing with the speaker today. Thank you very much. I'm glad to take any questions.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Hadow. And just a couple of remarks and committee bills, the roster, they've given suggested names. I've had lobbyists such as your lobbyist from the AKA. I have other lobbyists that represent kratom that got witnesses on the last agenda as well, the researchers, as you know. So I'll disagree with you on that part.
Mr. Chairman,
And then
those are not our researchers.
Mr.
These are people that are
Excuse me.
funded by the federal government.
Mr. Hadow. And then a couple questions too regarding the earlier video you saw. How does that, I know that's one of the AKA companies, does that represent how you feel about, is that targeting youth? Was that not a targeting video or how was that? I'm asking about the
Targeting youth.
video, Mr. Hadow.
Yes, with the American Kratom Association, as you know, Mr. Chairman, which you've ignored, we've advocated for more regulations on the advertising and product formulations. I don't like some of those products, but take a look. What you didn't show, Mr. Chairman, you have the pictures of the 708 products which appeal to children, dozens of them. You won't show those because, again, you want this to be
I
about
think
natural
this is
kratom.
where we've talked before. We have an agreement about 708s, that's for sure.
But you
But
won't show
also,
those products
Mr.
that are
Haddad.
appealing to children.
The meeting at special
Yes.
session, some of those packagings.
Yes.
Okay, let's move on.
Yes.
I mean,
We're gonna move.
talking about the exposure of kratom to young adults.
I agree.
Okay, let's focus on that. We've seen the packaging that you have talked about. It was in the meeting in a lab. So let's focus on what we're talking about here. And not, you're continuing to attack the chairman. Let's talk about the exposure of kratom. You can deal with your opinion of the chairman, some of the point, but we're here to talk about the subject matter. And yet you've yet to say a whole lot about it. So let's focus on this and you can take up the other issues at some other time.
Representative Meeks,
Thank you.
respectfully, I understand.
Mr.
So
Hadow.
I was going to answer, I was going to Representative Meeks if I could. I know you don't want me to speak.
Mr. Hadow, you're
So,
allowed.
Representative Meeks, I agree with you. Now, I submitted a PowerPoint and I will submit additional information that documents the science. We believe in the science. We think science should dictate public policy. We have advocated for that. We encouraged the chairman to allow some respected scientists funded over $100 million in NIDA funding went to the university. Well, most of that went to the University of Florida. They're engaged in this new study. We want science to dictate this, but we're not getting the voices aren't being heard. That's the only reason that we think this is unfair. That's all. We want you to have all this information as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hadow. That's where we agree to disagree on that point about the voices being heard. I believe they have been heard and they'll be heard in the future. So anyway, appreciate your testimony. If you do look at, if we have other questions, but one of the things I do want to ask you too, besides that is we keep going around two other topics. One, last time I checked, I'm quoting FDA now, consistent with FDA's practice with unapproved substances until the agency scientists can evaluate the safety and effectiveness of kratom or components in the treatment of any medical conditions. FDA will continue to warn the public against the use of kratom for medical treatment. The agency will also continue to monitor emerging data trends to better understand the substance and its components. Kratom is not appropriate for use as a dietary supplement. I think we've heard that name quite a bit today. FDA has concluded from available information, including scientific data, that kratom is a new dietary ingredient for which there is inadequate information to provide reasonable assurance that such ingredient does not present a significant or an unreasonable risk of illness or injury, and therefore dietary supplements that are contain kratom are adulterated under section 402F ... So anyway, that's in response to a little bit earlier. So there is a concern about that if some marketers are trying to say they're a dietary supplement or a food product. In the same way,
Can I answer that?
supporting You mentioned it earlier in the presentation, so
I
I'm
just-
just responding
I
to what
want,
you said.
no, but I want to clarify
Last-
what you said because it's
last point
incorrect.
Before we have additional questions. Questions, regarding getting in the country legally. I know there's red flags, from customs. We've heard that testimony before. We've seen it in here, got documentation of it. And so that's a, like I said, multi-billion-dollar business. And we just want to make sure we keep things safe for Georgians, do it the right way, make sure it's labeled correctly. If it's regulated, we regulate it, we enforce it, and that's what we're looking at now. So I do appreciate your testimony and,
Can I respond,
questions?
Mr. Chairman? I can respond to the FDA issue about dietary ingredients and supplements. I can respond to the import alert.
well, I was
Like
responding to
that.
your, I was responding to your earlier comments.
Well, no,
Got the-
I didn't
got
say
the
anything
information
about
in front
import
of
alerts, Mr. Chairman, respectfully, and I can answer
I'm
the
asking
FDA
other
issue.
committee members at this time. If they
So
have
you're not
other
going to let me
questions.
answer that.
I have a question.
Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not sure I've ever seen a situation just like this where somebody's attacking the integrity of the chairman of the committee. So not sure that's a good strategy, but back to what we're talking about, we talked about it being regulated, Kratom being, highly regulated, but the enforcement part of it is not happening. How do we do the enforcement? What, in your opinion, to address the enforcement issue, what do we do?
So thank you for the question. What we recommend is that, as I mentioned, every product's registered with an independent lab certified certificate of analysis compliant with the product, that you have a web page that's published by the state showing every compliant product. So a retailer knows that if they're selling a product that's not on that list, that they're going to be subject to penalties and fines. They should be. And it allows every consumer to know what the products are. So we think that's important, and fund the actual enforcement inspectors so that you can go out to the stores. And in the last hearing in the Senate, when we talked about enforcement, Senator Glass, I think it was, had asked the chairman, what is the enforcement mechanism? And he couldn't answer. And it was Matt Weatherington who came to the table with him and whispered, it's local law enforcement. They can't do it.
They're not doing it.
They're not in, they can't. How could they possibly know?
And if we don't enforce, no matter what law we
Right.
pass.
I agree.
And that's why in October, we're getting fiscal notes from Department of Revenue and the Department of Ag about enforcement. That's why in the one bill you mentioned last year, the past 2 years that were in the House, didn't get across the schedule because Ag didn't have a plan or the money flow for that. So that's a good point. But that's where we followed up between the Ag and Department of Revenue. If we do keep it on the shelves, how they could enforce it, and how much would it cost? I think we had a question online as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. I think I have 3 questions, if you'll indulge me. They're all yes or no questions, so I think it should be actually pretty fast to get through. The first one, just harkening back to something the chairman brought up, yes or no question. Is Kratom FDA approved for any medical indication or health use?
Yes,
It is not.
I can explain.
You're saying that Kratom is FDA approved for any clinical indication or health use?
For the health use, yes.
That's not what the FDA says.
That's
So-
that's not correct. Under the respectfully, Representative, under the dietary supplement, dietary supplement health and DSHEA, I'm sorry, Health Education Act, there is a process where a Kratom manufacturer can submit to the FDA a new dietary ingredient notification. There have been many companies that have done that. It requires the FDA then to evaluate the safety data provided by the FDA, by the manufacturer, and then the FDA can object, and then they resolve it.
All
And
right.
then at the conclusion of that process, and there have been many companies who have gone through that process, entered the marketplace, the burden is on the FDA to take them off the market if they think they're unsafe. They haven't done
Okay,
so.
so it's just as noted, Kratom is not currently FDA approved for any health indication or medical use.
That's not true.
Here's the second yes or no question. I think we can generally agree on this committee and pretty much overall that synthetic extracts of Kratom, including 7-hydroxymetragenine, should be more regulated because of their higher potency. However, I think distinguishing between these two products as though they are totally different gives a sense that kratom itself is safer than it is because you're treating 7-OH as this entirely novel product. So the question is, are 7-OH and mitragynine metabolites of kratom?
No,
They're not.
no,
Wow.
and I can explain.
You must have a
Representative.
different fact pattern than,
Representative, respectfully, the 7-OH does not occur in the natural plant. It is a metabolite, but mitragynine is an inherent alkaloid among 50 plus alkaloids that Dr. McCurdy describes as a symphony of how they work together. 7-OH occurs after harvesting in the catalyzing during the drying process. And it occurs as the FDA described it and as the HHS secretary described it and the DA administrator in trace amounts. It's only when it is chemically manipulated that it becomes an opioid because they flip the content of 7-OH to being the majority of the product. During Prohibition days, we wouldn't call corn moonshine. You cannot call mitragynine 7-OH. They are not the same. They occur only in trace amounts. And when it's processed in the liver, as was described to the committee in the last meeting by the Emory professor, it occurs at such a low level, the blood plasma never get to the 7-OH levels that are in these 7-OH products. That's the problem.
so as noted, 7-OH as sold is a synthetic extract from the kratom leaf that is more concentrated. However, what it means when you say something is a metabolite is that when it is converted in the human body, as in when you take kratom, that's what metabolite means. And also just to clarify that 7-OH, though we use it sort of casually, what that stands for is 7-hydroxymitragynine. So
Correct, but that's a chemical reformulation, Representative. That is not in the trace amounts that occurs.
a
It is
metabolite
deliberately engineered to be an opioid.
a metabolite means that is what the human body converts it to. So do these metabolites have action at the opioid receptor?
They do. As you heard Dr. McCurdy explain, that the difference between the natural plant, which has trace levels, amounts of 7-OH, when they hit the mu-opioid receptor, mitragynine actually moderates the activity and competes with 7-OH. And that's why it has the partial agonist effect that goes to the sector of the brain that improves your mood, gives you a little pain relief, not to the euphoric high. 7-OH, when it's the dominant product, competes at the mu-opioid receptor, it overwhelms mitragynine, goes to the euphoric high center, puts you at risk for respiratory depression.
So given that 7-hydroxymitragynine and mitragynine are metabolites of kratom, and they have action at the opioid receptor, do you think, this is a yes or no question, do you think that substances that have action at the opioid receptor, AKA opiates, should be sold over the counter and at gas stations?
Trick question, no, emphatically
question.
no. It's a trick question, respectfully, because natural kratom products at the levels at which mitragynine and 7-OH occur, and you can look at the FDA data on the FDA and 7-OH website, shows they are dramatically, chemically, deliberately engineered opioids, which the 7-OH is, where mitragynine is not classified as an opioid. Many things have activity at the mu-opioid receptors, as you know. They are not full-blown opioids. And that the chemically engineering done by the 7-OH manufacturers makes them into full-blown opioids. They are synthetic, chemically manipulated products.
Just to be clear, the definition of an opioid is something that acts at the opioid receptor. That is literally the definition of what opioid is. It does not involve-
respectfully disagree, Representative. There is no way that the FDA calls kratom an opioid or scientists call it an opioid, the mitragynine. They don't do that. And this is an absurd example, but cheese operates at the opioid receptor level because of the content of cheese. It is why pizza is the most popular food in America, because it stimulates people because of activity at the mu-opioid receptors. We do not call cheese an opioid.
We'll leave it here. Appreciate your interesting fact pattern. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Representative Al. Any other questions from the committee?
Yeah, I have one. Do you take kratom?
I do. 10 years.
Okay? The question that I want to say to everybody is, or the point that I want to make is that kratom is effectively not legal to be imported in the United States for human consumption. That's what it says.
I
That's
agree.
what we were testified about. So why are we sitting here going around slinging all this stuff when it's supposed to be illegal? If it's illegal, and we should enforce it. So that's my point to it. And there are a lot of people that have been hurt by this stuff. You show those products over there. We all use some of the, I've never had a monster drink. I don't need a monster drink. But you know, a cause of death can be caused by obesity. There's a lot of different things that can be done to cause you to die. But we have a situation here with this kratom that it's taking over some young folks, and it's taking over people vulnerable that don't know. Now, I'm one of these skeptics. I'm old, you can tell. I'm probably older than you are, but I don't like medicine at all. But we need to make sure that we follow the law, and the law says it's not supposed to come in the United States of America for human consumption. To me, that is the overlying reason that we should look at this. It's illegal. Thank you, sir.
So Representative, I'm 76. I'm not sure how we compare in age. You look younger than me. But I can tell you this, that you have a fundamental misunderstanding of the import alert. Let me explain. You cannot import kratom and then ingest it in its raw form. So in order to import, the importer has to declare in advance to the FDA with a document that they submit, and they say, I'm importing kratom. It is not going to be used for human consumption. It'll be used for reformulation into a product. The FDA at that point can seize the product. They have done that occasionally because they suspect that the paperwork wasn't properly filled out. They're not certain that they're not just going to issue it for human consumption. Then they release it. This is done commonly. The reason there are 24 million Americans using kratom today is because kratom is coming in legally when they follow the proper procedures and paperwork. And trust me, if the FDA did as you're suggesting, they would stop it at the border. It all comes in, with the exception of a little bit from Hawaii and a little bit from Florida. It all comes in from Southeast Asia. So this is not difficult, and it all comes in registered documentation. There have been bad actors who tried to evade that process, call it fertilizer, food dye, and they're using it just to sell to the powdered kratom to everybody without reformulating it. So that's why product COAs, certificate analysis, are very important along the way. It's not, as you suggested, illegal for kratom products to be imported into the United States.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yep.
Representative Meeks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your comments. I'd like to acknowledge that there are those who utilize kratom for different purposes that is helpful to their health. Understand that. This committee today is, as we have talked about, is talking about the youth exposure to kratom. That's our focus today. We acknowledge that the manufacturers and there are packaging that has been attractive to kids. We've seen it with other products that other committees have developed policy to regulate in our state. And given the health benefits that we hear that kratom can use to be treated, my question is simple. It ain't a trick question. It's just simply, should things and substances of this nature be sold in a venue that is so readily available to those who don't know what they're taking?
Thank you for that question. When I spoke at Nora Volko, who's the director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, talked about this issue in congressional testimony and statements she made about the importance of having products that are potentially valuable harm reduction tools available to people because of the stigma, and you heard that from some of the addiction recovery specialists, the stigma associated with being an addict. And she recommends that kratom, specifically singled out kratom, should be readily accessible. The problem she described is that many people won't seek treatment. So if it's a safer product, certainly use it. That's why she spent over $100 million studying it. And she said that if you have it available, a person will get it because they can't find a treatment bed or they can't afford it, either in rural settings or even in urban settings. So her point is, she actually studies this in her own lab at NIDA. She says, this is a safer product. It's not going to cause the harm that an opioid will, which is why the NIH just embarked on their study. I agree completely that packaging that is attractive to children should be eliminated. But I can tell you this Kratom tastes so bad, kids don't like it. And they're only going to take the spike stuff because it gives them a euphoric high. Natural Kratom doesn't do that. 7-OH does. That's why we got to get it off the shelves. And some natural Kratom leaf products that have used these industrial grade solvents to spike the potency, they should be removed from the shelves as well.
But is it not true that that one time may be the only time? If you're using a spike product that's being bought at a convenience store, one time may be the only time.
Amen. Absolutely true.
So
my
point is, and to the testimony that we've heard from others, and the gentleman spoke of, you go in to buy a bottle of water and it's there, it's right there, and you didn't answer the question. Is it one of those products that should be sold in a convenience store or a vape shop where people are going in and purchasing without any guidance, or maybe some guidance from a pharmacist, if that's where it is, as to the benefits and or the risk?
Yes, that's why we advocate for every product that is sold in the state of Georgia has to be registered, proven with a COA from an independent lab that it's compliant, every product. And
I get that, but you're not answering my question. Should we sell it in a convenience store? Yes or no? It's simple.
I just answered that from what Nora Volko says.
I'm asking you.
Yes.
We should be able to sell it in a convenience store.
Not the bad stuff. I didn't say that, and I won't say that because I think those products should be removed from the marketplace. But the majority of natural kratom leaf consumers use it as a replacement for a cup of coffee. Yeah, they see an energy boost, increased focus. A second tranche, and this is from Dr. Oliver Grundman that the chairman has referred to in the past on his research. The second bucket of people use it to improve their mood and fight off feelings of anxiety, all serving size dependent. And then that third group, which are the people that are treating acute and chronic pain, that's me. And then a subset of that group are trying to get off opioids. That's not me. But they find success with it. So is the product dangerous? That's the critical part. 7-OH is dangerous. Spiked kratom products that use industrial grade solvents are dangerous. Let's get them off the marketplace. Should you be able to buy kratom in a convenience store? Absolutely.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Ridley.
I guess, first of all, like being sold in a gas station, I think is not the right argument because we buy alcohol and tobacco in a gas station, which the FDA says there's no known health benefit to, and any kid can walk in and see the tobacco and alcohol. So I disagree with that argument. But the one thing that I was on the medical marijuana study committee last year, and the one thing they complained about was just like you, it's the lack of access to be able to testify. But when the lobbyists did testify and took the time like you are right now, they had 3 or 4 advocates with them and split their time with them on why this was beneficial. They drug up the crying child who no longer had seizures. And you're relying purely on public testimony. So I guess, why aren't you bringing your own people using your time to tell their stories and we're relying only on the public comment?
Yeah, fair. I didn't think about doing that. I heard the complaints of the 24 that were at the last hearing. They said that it's a 3. I don't know if this is true. They said it's a 3 to 3.5 hour drive, depending on this, whether you follow speed limit or not, to come over here with not knowing whether they would be able to testify. And when I looked at the agenda, I abandoned the scientific discussion. I'm going to submit that. I did submit the PowerPoint, but this was so, I'm sorry, stacked. And you look at everybody's anti-kratom and you have this island there, me. And so I'm obviously responding. And I think it's a good, I'm sorry.
Wait a second, guys.
There are some kratom advocates.
Excuse me, Mr. Haddow, if I can take over from here. Representative, if I can add to that comment you just made, just for point of reference, since you mentioned it, First meeting, I think Mr. Keenan will agree, the people he's asked to testify, I have let them testify or in the future. Another Kratom lobbyist had the Emir researcher last time testify. We've got another one who wanted one testify in Athens of Bremen. They'll be testifying. So I have responded to that industry. So anyway, I appreciate that question.
Mr.
Any
Chairman,
last- any
Mr.
last
Chairman,
comments, Mr. Hadow, before we end
okay,
this?
Mr. Chairman, you did not invite the Global Kratom Coalition to participate in this hearing. You did not invite the Botanics for Better Health and Wellness to
And we
participate
can
in this hearing.
discuss that
Those are-
afterwards. If we have the same lobbyist in mind who represents Global Kratom, they have been included.
They
So,
were, no,
appreciate your- I
I,
appreciate
Mr.
your-
Chairman, they were not
I
invited.
appreciate your testimony, Mr. Hadow.
It was-
Thank you. Have a
Mr.
nice,
Chair- Mr.
thank you,
Chairman,
Mr. Thank
Mr.
you, Mr.
Chairman,
Hadow. Appreciate,
Respectfully, I
I
just think you ought to
appreciate the
listen.
testimony.
I hope the Kratom advocates can have time today to testify.
We will have public comments this meeting. Thank you
Okay.
for your
And
testimony.
then I'll hand out
Thank you
our
for your
complaint.
testimony.
I know you want to cut me off, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say I'll hand out the complaint so that the committee can look at it. We do this regretfully, but we think that there's no opportunity for this to be heard.
Mr. Hadow, thank you.